Would you be able to find out when the last time was that we wrote a check for CBD oil?
Good evening,
Just want to make sure that.
and welcome to the City Council
wanna make sure that we pay
Conference
you for
meeting
everything
of
before
May
it's
14th, 2019. The first item on the agenda is an update on the progress of the Memorandum of Understanding regarding the University North Park Tax Increment Finance District. And Catherine Walker, our interim city attorney, will be giving the presentation.
Okay, so just by way of background, the TIF, what we're talking about ending is a tax increment finance district that was created back in 2006 that authorized up to $54.725 million in project costs. And basically, the TIF provided the funding source for those project costs. They included traffic and roadway improvements, a hotel conference center, cultural facilities, legacy park, lifestyle center, and economic development. It's been implemented over time with the adoption of a number of contracts. We've had 6 development agreements, 3 other agreements, and then there have been transactions between NEDC and University of North Park related to this property as well. So due to a declining trend in our sales tax revenues, council has expressed a desire to end the increment early so that all of the sales tax revenues, instead of just 40% of the revenues generated in UMP, can go to the general fund. Although we can repeal the TIF ordinance, we have all of the contracts that I mentioned that create other obligations that cannot be unilaterally rescinded or repealed. And to limit the city's exposure to potential liability regarding those contracts, we were directed to work with the primary developers to determine how to address our desire to end the TIF early through contract amendments and project plan amendments. Basically, we think we'll have about $15 to $17 million available for the remaining project costs, and there's about $25 million left to complete. So we did a memorandum of understanding that was adopted in late March that provides us a framework and a timeline to try and achieve the city's goals. So I want to give you a update on how we're doing on all of those items. So what has been done so far on your agenda tonight, you'll be ratifying the selection of an auditor to do the special audit that was required by the MOU. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about identifying the site for Norman Forward projects. One of the things that was addressed in the MOU and that was included in a letter we received from the developer was an offer to potentially locate Norman Forward projects that we were looking at North Base site for in the University of North Park TIF district. And they proposed 2 sites, one north of Rock Creek Road that's owned by NEDC, and then a site south of Rock Creek Road that had previously been designated for a cultural facility. And then I'll give you an update on the negotiations. So the site selection, as I said, the audit, that's on your agenda tonight to ratify. Using TIF funds, that audit will be complete early to mid-June, I believe. ADG has been engaged by the city to develop an apples-to-apples comparison of the North Bay site, the UTC site, and the NEDC site at council's request. Just trying to give us information to help you all make the decision about which site you think would be best for these improvements. So they've applied a comparative site analysis matrix, and this report, I should say, is still in draft form. We intend to meet about it later this week and finalize it and get that out to you all as soon as it's final. But they're looking at 4 different things: site considerations, so capacity, infrastructure, things like that; urban impact, what are the neighboring land uses, what is their compatible development nearby; access considerations, this includes for drivers, pedestrians, service vehicles that serve the facilities, and public transit; and then financial considerations. So what does the land cost? What will it cost to prep the land? How will that impact the construction cost? So this is the first site. This is North Base, fronting or adjacent to Flood and east of the YMCA. We have a contract for that land right now that would call for a purchase of 14 acres at $2.435 million, 14 and some change, I should say. Requests, there was a request made by council that the cultural facility funds from the TIF be directed to the Norman Forward projects at North Base, and that's what sort of started all this discussion. We know we have road improvements at North Base exceeding $1 million, and then of course the demolition of the existing gym or hangar, and any environmental concerns associated with that. And then we also know by looking at our GIS maps that there are not public water and sewer lines at this site, so that's something that we would have to consider if this site were to be selected. In the ADG assessment right now, they have it ranked 3rd.
Councilmember Scott.
Yes.
Is there an estimate on what it would cost to demolish the hangar?
I don't know that we have 4. Is that what we're guessing? 400.
It could be that high, depending on this.
Yeah.
A little under $500,000?
Yeah, it just depends on the asbestos. I mean, we'll have to do an environmental assessment, so we'll have to get a contract for that, and they'll do that study. I think everyone's pretty sure there's asbestos. It's just how much and what they have to do to contain that when they demolish it.
Okay, and then we also just don't know the cost of extending the water and sewage, or do we have an estimate on that?
We know the length. Let me pull this up real quick. Terry, do you have that handy? Terry did some math on this today. It's 2,000 linear feet from the gym to the largest sewer line to the west. It's about 680 linear feet to the nearest sewer line to the south. It's 730 feet from the gym to the water line on the east side of Flood Avenue. So there's quite a bit of water and sewer extension that would have to be built in there.
What's the second one?
680 linear feet from the gym to the nearest sewer line to the south.
Thank you.
So we've got some options. They're just quite a distance away because this property has been served by OU and not city public lines within interior to the property. This is the second site. This is the NEDC site outlined in yellow. We'd actually probably have to capture that 3rd lot abutting 24th Avenue as well to have enough property for this project. The property outlined is in red. Is the subject of a right of first refusal that Emmy has. So that's the yellow, and then the lot to the north of the west side of that yellow parcel that we would have to acquire. The cost of the acquisition for this is unknown, but it will be tied to NEDC's outstanding debt. They received, as you all will recall, a $2.5 million grant from the EDA for economic development activities on this site. And so we are still exploring with EDA what impact, if any, Norman Forward projects on this site would have on that grant and the repayment terms. The property is also impacted by certain repurchase and cure rights held by UNP. They sold the property at a big discount to NEDC, and so they retain some rights over the land if it's not developed under certain timelines, or if NEDC were to default on the property. The lot assembly could present a design challenge just because as it goes around this pond in the middle, there's some service drive access issues potentially. You'd like to use the pond as an amenity for the facility, but how do you get the service vehicles to those areas and that kind of thing? It's just the configuration is odd. It might present a little bit of a design challenge. The Optimist Club, of course, with this site could continue to use their existing gym during construction. I know that's something you all have heard of from them as a concern they have. Stormwater drainage is already provided here. We have water and sewer lines here. They would likely have to be relocated to accommodate the design of the facility, but they are at this location. And ADG at this point has this site ranked 2nd. This is the 3rd site, and this is the UTC property. UTC agreed in the amendment number 1 to development agreement number 5 back in 2014, I think, 2014, to donate some land for a cultural facility and then to sell additional land at a discounted cost. And so this is that parcel. It would not take the entire parcel outlined in red, but this is generally where it would be located. The cost of acquisition is the subject of our negotiation. As I said in that amendment, they agreed to donate a couple of acres, sell another 1.5 acres for $5 a square foot, and then sell additional acreage for $5.50 a square foot. Water and sewer is available at this site along the edge of the property.
Councilmember Clark.
Do we have an estimate with these figures? Like an approximate?
It is 2.3 or 2.4, I believe, million with those figures. Water and sewer is already available. Drainage has already been provided with previous developments. We would have to possibly extend Rock Creek Road 100 feet or so to accommodate any entrance into the site. But one of the advantages is with tournaments and swim meets and trying to create that draw of outside visitors to spend their money in Norman. It's adjacent to hotel and restaurant development. And so that is an advantage to this site. And then there's the possible opportunity for shared parking.
Councilmember Scott and then Clark.
Okay, a couple of questions just to clarify, Councilmember Clark's, was that the cost of acquisition for that land, or was that?
If you use those development agreement number 5 prices.
Okay.
Yes.
And then is there an estimate on the extension of Rock Creek?
That was my question.
And then I have a follow-up question to that as well.
I don't have the specific number for that extension, and it would really depend on the design of the facilities, whether or not it would need to be extended. Probably would need to be extended just at least a little bit to accommodate a drive. But
Okay. And then would it be possible to have a sign off of I-35 directing people to get off at Tecumseh instead of on Robinson to go to those sites, like if we were to choose this? Because I obviously have concerns about Robinson
Sure.
already. And again, when we talk about bringing people to this area, Tecumseh is really the best option to be getting off of the highway for that a number of visitors that we project to have. So would that be possible?
yeah, that's something we could work with ODOT on wayfinding signage for wherever the projects are built. That's something we would probably want to work with ODOT to do along I-35.
Okay, that really would make me feel more comfortable.
There's an opportunity for shared parking here, and ADG has this site ranked first. So we have some pretty big negotiation points here that were evident in the MOU. You all have expressed with a resolution last November that we need to work with the public schools to determine the budget impact on the schools of ending the TIF early. And there's still some debate, I think, going on about that, but that has been considered in what I've been using to negotiate. And that's something that I have my eye on. We also need to address the remaining authorized projects. So there's a few things left in the Legacy Park project component. There's, of course, the Lifestyle Center component, economic development, and then Norman Forward being kind of the biggie right now as in terms of deciding the location, the price, and how that would be funded, how much of the cultural facility funds would be needed. And then traffic and roadway improvements. I heard you loud and clear last week. I'm working on getting more money in traffic and roadway improvements due to our federal funding dilemma for the Robinson and Crossroads project. And so that was included in my latest term sheet. But the big issue is there's $25 million left in project costs and $15 to $17 million of TIF revenues. And so that's the crux of the negotiations is that dollar figure. In the MOU, as I said, you all directed us to end the increment and address the outstanding contractual claims by June 30th. The goal there, the deadline in the MOU was to get the amendments to the project plan finalized by May 15th. I've got a project plan amendment drafted, but it's a skeleton at this point because we don't have agreement on all points. And then amendments to existing contracts, we were going to try and have those ready by the end of May. And of course, that's still pending agreement. The MOU automatically.
Councilmember Scott.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Wasn't tomorrow our deadline for
The
those
15th.
amendments to be agreed upon?
Yes, the 15th was the deadline in the MOU to have the project plan amendments complete.
Councilmember Castleberry.
Just to be clear, that was the deadline that we put in the MOU. They didn't necessarily agree to it.
Yeah, they signed the
Yes, they
MOU.
did.
But,
Ask
yeah,
a question. Or did they? Thank you. Let me finish my question.
yeah. I don't recall who suggested it, but obviously the deadlines, if we want to get it done by June 30th, that was an important date to help us meet that deadline.
Councilmember Hickman.
I just want to be clear for the public. The MOU had a deadline of May 15th for the amendments to the project plan to be completed. Is that correct?
Yes.
And we are not going to meet that deadline, correct? Tomorrow is the May 15th.
Yeah.
So we're not going to have amendments to the project plan by May 15th.
No, I don't think we'll have agreement on all points by tomorrow.
And the MOU also required that the deadline to identify mutually acceptable locations for the Norman Ford facilities was on or before May 15th, correct?
Yeah.
And we're also not going to meet that deadline, are we?
It depends on the feedback we get tonight. I mean, that's what we're really counting on you guys for. We want to move forward with this site, and we have the framework in place, depending on which site you choose, to move forward. And so that's critical feedback we need from you all.
Well, respectfully, we've engaged ADG to do an analysis. You're asking us to consider this tonight and to give you feedback. Why don't we have their analysis? And I'm saying this to you because you're the one I could ask the question to.
Sure.
It would be helpful to have had that ADG analysis to make an informed decision. So I, again, don't see how we can actually make a recommendation tonight for the deadline being tomorrow when we don't even have the report from our experts.
Well, as I said, there's a lot of components, the things I went through on each site to look at. And so it's just taken some time to get that done. And there's a draft done. We think it'll be done this week. But it's just a tight timeline. We knew that going in. It's a difficult timeline to meet.
Councilmember Bierman.
When did ADG start their analysis?
3.
3 weeks ago?
Mhm.
And we passed this MOU in March.
March
26th.
26th, yes.
So
After 2 days.
why didn't we get moving on this work with the site selection, knowing that we had this May 15th deadline? Why did they only start 3 weeks ago?
Initially, staff was handling that internally, trying to get those cost estimates together. But we really felt like it was important to get you all an independent analysis from a third party. And ADG was in a unique position because they're familiar with these projects. They've worked with us on the Norman Forward Initiative. So they seemed like a logical choice to do that and to be able to do it in a pretty good time crunch.
I have a second question. That's right. And my second question is, I guess this is a somewhat subjective answer that I'm going to need from you. When would you say that the negotiations on this really started in earnest?
Before the MOU was adopted.
Okay, because my concern.
We've had for all of 2019 weekly phone calls, just standing.
Because my concern is that we are up against the deadline tomorrow, and we hadn't really gotten any kind of a good update since we passed the MOU. So I don't know that really any of us can say that we know exactly how in-depth or how detailed these negotiations have been, or really how interested, the other parties have been in hammering out an agreement. Because I know if it were me and I wanted to get this done, I wouldn't come up against this deadline unless it was absolutely necessary for me to come this close to a deadline. I'm not a procrastinator. I don't like doing things last minute. I always tried and submitted things as soon as I could after I got the task. So it's concerning to me that we're at this point, which was something that I brought up when we were talking about the MOU, is I don't like that tomorrow is the deadline and we don't have as basically a final document in front of us for the project plan amendments or for the Norman Forward projects. I don't like that. And it does not make me feel very good about how these negotiations have gone, that we're at this point.
Councilmember, I'm sorry, I thought you were,
I am done.
okay. Councilmember Castleberry.
I guess one question and a comment. How many lawyers on their side do they have working on this?
6 or so.
So those 6 or 7 lawyers probably I don't know, Mr. Hickman, maybe they'll answer this question, but lawyers work up to deadlines, don't they? They don't usually get stuff done before them, especially when there's 7 of them.
Are you saying we're procrastinators?
I'm saying they're probably procrastinating on their side of it. My next comment is have you worked out something with them that if we can't meet this deadline by the June 30th, this whole deal, this May 15th was so we can get done by June 30th.
Right. I mean, it was keeping in mind the statutory process for the review committee.
So if we can't get done by June 30th, say it goes to July 15th, whatever.
A great
August
segue to
1st
the
on what
next
this-
slide.
Okay.
Yeah. So what the
Uh,
MOU,
We've got 2 more questions. Councilmember Carter and then Councilmember Scott. And then let's see, maybe if we go through a little longer, we'll have more of the information for that will answer our questions before. Okay, Councilmember Carter.
So would it be helpful, though, if you had a feeling from council of which stops are currently favored? Just like we know they ranked the one location number 1.
yes,
If we were to agree with that, that would be helpful.
that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to make a comment about the process, that I've just picked up the phone all along this process and called Ms. Walker. And she's been great about filling me in on what the status of the negotiations are. And so I want to thank you for that. I think you've been doing it very diligently, and I think that I think it's at least in my business career in dealing with attorneys, it seems to be a strategy of attorneys and car dealers to drag out a negotiation to the very last minute.
Now we're like car
And
dealers.
so that's a kind of a strategy, and that's why.
It's a weird way to
that's how it all-
compliment her.
That's how it is, you know? So anyway, please go ahead.
Okay. So,
Councilmember Scott
oh, sorry,
still
I'm
has her
sorry.
hand up.
I knew you had your hand.
I left it low. I didn't forget about me. I have 3 questions. So when did the statutory review committee meet, and did they discuss these? And then similarly, the same question basically with the Norman Ford,
They have not met.
and they were supposed to have met.
That's what we
Correct.
discussed.
And no, I'm sorry,
Originally.
the statutory review committee.
The statutory review committee will meet to consider the amendments once they're complete. But we don't have agreed upon amendments yet to give to them.
And then the Norman Ford committee also met, correct? And did any of their committee minutes kind of play or go into this tonight to influence it?
No, there's not committees for the pool or the gym yet. They don't exist yet. The senior ad hoc group has met.
Yes,
And they've made a recommendation we presented last time to you for a different site altogether.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
Yeah,
Given
I
this-
was talking about the Norman Ford, yeah.
and given the
Okay.
senior center feedback or senior feedback about the center, I think it was pretty clear to everyone, UNP was not their preferred site.
Yes, that
So
was
we have
clear.
not operated under the assumption that the senior center would be in UNP.
Okay, but the other Norman Ford projects we're still considering. Okay,
The Norman Forward Citizens Financial Oversight Board was certainly aware of and discussed the North Park sites.
okay. And they didn't have something they wanted to push or toward council or give to us to consider?
They took no formal
They
action.
took no formal action. Okay. So if we make it third question, final question.
I'd make a comment about that, given that I was at that meeting. Is that allowable?
Well, if you're called on, it's allowable.
Would somebody
we weren't-
want to call on me?
The chair calls on you.
Well, thank you. The Financial Oversight Committee was not asked to give input onto alternative locations for the Norman Forward projects. It's been made clear to us, or at least stressed to us all along, that we're not supposed to do what we're not asked to do. So we were given information about things that you had passed. And we're told that negotiations were happening, but we didn't have what I would call a robust discussion to be able to provide any input into the 3 alternative sites.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rogers. And I have one final question.
Okay.
Okay, so then it kind of, I think, follows up on Councilmember Carter's question. So if we make a decision tonight, does that affect our negotiations in the MOU? Do you think we could come to an agreement tomorrow if we were to give direction?
I don't know that we'd come to an agreement tomorrow, but it definitely helps me focus my efforts on one piece of land. Right now, I'm split between the south parcel and the north parcel, or north base, which what's it going to take to achieve these
then-
projects at either of those sites. So it would be helpful to me to be able to focus on one site.
Okay, and so if we don't, then we violate, or the MOU is violated, I guess, because we had a deadline of tomorrow.
But yeah, the deadline would not be met. But if I can finish this slide, I think
Go
it'll address that concern.
Thank you.
The MOU had these deadlines in there, but it didn't really have any, penalty or this is grounds for ending the MOU early. What it did say is that if the negotiations are fruitless at any point, then the participation in the MOU can be terminated early. I don't think we're there yet. It is not fruitless. We're still seeing movement. Both parties are trying to find a way to meet in the middle. It's all about how you divvy up this money between the project costs. And so we've not reached the point where we're throwing up our hands and saying we're never going to agree. We're just not there yet. If we cannot complete we had talked about this yesterday in another conference call, but if the process cannot be completed by June 30th, and I'm not saying September, October, I'm saying, let's say we're in July and we've got the project plan amendments going through the process with the statutory review committee. And so we're really close to being finished. We've agreed on a final product, but we didn't get it done by June 30th. What we have talked about doing in that case is making the project plan amendments, making any development agreement effective on June 30th so that we still can reach our goal of ending the increment on June 30th.
That's nice.
And that's the whole point of this.
Right. I
Not
mean, the
getting
whole
done by
point's
June
to end the
30th, but get
increment
the increment
and not
done by
have
June 30th.
threatened, not have any litigation. And so I don't think it's fair to say we're going to do that in October, of course. But I mean, if we've got it in front of the statutory committee mid-June and we can get through that process, I mean, to me, it'd be worth it to finalize the process and make everything effective June 30th so we don't lose any of that revenue that we're anticipating in our general fund budget. That's all I had. I mean, if we don't have a specific feeling about the site, I can continue doing what I've been doing, but as I said earlier, it'd be helpful to kind of focus my efforts on
Okay,
one side or another.
Councilmember Hickman and then Councilmember Carter.
So again, I just want to be clear, if we were to recommend one of the North Park sites tonight in some fashion, I guess especially the south site, which is ADG's ranked number 1, which I'd like to know more about the basis of that ranking. You're indicating to us that would mean that the city of Norman, and this thing is important because I think the public would care about this, the city of Norman would potentially be writing them a check to buy land. We'd be paying the developer.
As I said, that's a subject of our negotiations right now, but that's
But
what
what's
was
in
in
your
an
slide?
existing development agreement.
Yeah, okay.
So,
And we'd be buying, yeah, okay. And we'd be writing them a check close in price to the purchase price for the North Bay site.
if that's the price we settled on.
No.
But not,
Well,
we're still working on that
What I'm trying to
piece.
figure out is, have we negotiated, I mean, you're telling us the contract price, and so I have no idea about any of the negotiation. I mean, are we, one point in time, it had been indicated that maybe they would donate the land, or maybe they would sell it to us at a discount. Do we think that's going to happen?
I think the price will come down from this. I hesitate to say to what, but I do think there's room for negotiation in the price. Certainly, my proposal has been donation.
Let them know it should be. Councilmember Carter.
Well, I feel like that site, what do we want to call that site?
South.
South. Let's call it the
We'll call that
south.
south. Is my preferred constituents I've talked to, their preferred, the Optimist Club, the Aquatics Club, their preferred. As a person that goes and puts on events all over the country, we do horse shows, but the concept's the same. An event that's close to a hotel is better than one that's not. And the proximity to that hotel is a huge game changer because they'll be able to attract regional, I believe, regional, beyond just our local or even Oklahoma events there. And they'll be able to walk across the street or the sidewalk to the hotel. across the street to the restaurants. It's a great location. It's a phenomenal location. And the fact, you know, and the way I understand, you might want to explain the ADG, but the way I think you explained it to me was that, you know, they basically just looked at the existing infrastructure, right? So we've got the roads, the water, the electricity, all the stuff, and they ranked it according to that criteria, you know, not this marketing retail criteria, but just kind of the nuts and bolts criteria, the infrastructure criteria. So, I mean, I think that's a comfortable thing, you know, to assume, you know, that's why. So this is a good side. I think it's prudent on our part to move this. If we want to hold to the, have any chance of this MOU, I mean, you're right now, you're negotiating the money. I mean, this is the crux of the argument. You know, we've got to have a position. You can't negotiate, focus your efforts on 3 different things at one time. You need direction from us on a spot. I think that's the spot. I think we as a council should give you that direction. That's the spot. And let's see if we can't crank this puppy out and get it done.
Councilmember Scott.
I too have heard and received lots of emails about the UTC location, the south location, and looking at it, seeing lots of trees and green space. I'm wondering if a environmental impact study could also be conducted in this area. I believe there may be bird watching in this area. I think Embassy Suites sometimes hosts these things. I believe I've seen something from the Audubon Society. So that's a question I have. What's the impact to the area? Could we maintain some of the green space?
And that'll all come down to design.
And that would be
Really?
a second, like after we kind of give you the direction to go that route or not, that would be when we look at that.
Yeah, I mean, we can do what we can to look at it now, but a lot of the green space issues are going to come down to the design.
Okay, but so then I guess the question is, what would be the cost of the environmental impact study if there would be one?
I don't know that I've ever done one quite like that.
We'd be doing, talking about the birds.
We've got some quotes.
Environmental impact.
I've done environmental
Usually for
assessments for asbestos and things like that. That's
hazards.
I hate to say.
That I see. I'm concerned about the wild.
Like chemical hazards,
Yeah,
things
okay.
in the soil.
They would tear the trees down when they developed it.
Yeah.
And we can
Either
really
way,
get
so they'll
that.
still
Old
tear it down.
oil
Those
wells.
are
At least if we were on this space, we would have some control over the design and I guess preserving some of that, rather than like what Councilmember Castleberry was just saying, that when it's developed, they'll tear the trees and stuff down anyway. So, okay.
Councilmember Holman.
I agree with several comments that have been made. I think we should make a decision, and my preference would be the south site and the UNP.
Yeah.
When I first heard about
I
the
don't know.
Pisces project, probably in 2010 or 11, the actual original design and site that I saw was actually in this location 9 years ago. And it was actually designed to make it look like an airplane hangar so that it would resemble the airport architecture, which I thought was neat. I agree with the comments that it's close to a lot of amenities that already exist, like hotels and restaurants and shopping. And although throughout Norman Forward, we kind of all have known and come to terms with the fact that the Navy hangar would be demolished in this process, I had always personally hoped that there might be a way that we could find to save it, because there are, by my count, only 5 Navy bases left in the whole city, including South and North Base. And to me, it's a pretty iconic building. I played Optimus Sports as a kid and was in that gym. So was my dad when he was a kid. And I think it's just kind of a unique structure that we have in Norman that a lot of other communities don't. And I think we should do everything possible to try to preserve it if we can. And I've heard mentioned if we build a new facility in a different location, it could be used as auxiliary courts, and maybe we can make some improvements and investments in it in the future. So, you know, I want to get this MOU done. I want to get this deal done so that we can end the TIF, in the tax increment diversion, and get these projects, you know, solidified what we're going to do with them. And so staff knows what to do, and we can get some of these items off our agenda and move on to the next one. So I prefer that we would make a decision on this location. That's my preference. Thank you.
Councilmember Clark.
I want to second third what Councilmember Carter said, and second what Councilmember Holman said. I think it's great for a tourism aspect. I love the idea of investing, and I think Councilmember Hickman, you suggested based on our military history in Norman, which a lot of the Optimist Club members have expressed that we need a site while it's building, so it allows us to continue functioning and providing that quality of life aspect to our young athletes in Norman. So I fully support the UTC South site, and I appreciate your work on this, and let's get rolling.
Councilmember Castleberry.
UTC South. I think the other thing, basically I agree with everything everybody said. I think having the, being able to keep the hangar through construction and after construction allows us to even host larger tournaments. And that you'll have two off sites there. One could be men's, one could be women's, or bigger, different age groups, however you want to do that. I think the other thing to keep in mind is the UNP North site is very valuable land. It's much more valuable as commercial office space, and to maintain the original idea of developing that as the tech centers and the higher payer jobs and as commercial. And that's what that pond was there for. That's what those sites are broken out for. And so I like the idea that we can maintain that site for future development, for economic development, for keeping the advanced technology part of that other plan in there. So I think keeping that land available has got quite a bit of value to it, as opposed to the south side's really not that valuable from a development standpoint, other than what we're doing with it, being based so close to the Embassy Suites, overflow parking, and all we're doing is talking about extending the road 100 feet. So I fully support the South Bay site, or UNT South, not South Bay.
Councilmember Bierman.
I don't necessarily really have a strong feeling one way or another about which site. In a perfect world, this particular issue would not have been wrapped into negotiations about ending the TIF in the first place. I think that it complicates things. I think that it unnecessarily delays things. And like I said, in a perfect world, we would have been able to have these two discussions and negotiations separately, which I think would have been more appropriate. They don't really have anything to do with each other than where it's located. My concern about this whole thing comes from a different issue, which is complicating it even further by wanting to add even more road projects. And I do have concerns about what that'll do to our negotiation ability. If we're trying to spend more money out of the TIF, then it makes it even more difficult to address all of these other issues that we have. So I'm not so sure that I want to be spending any additional money out of this fund on road projects. And I do also have concerns about how this might impact funds that could be used to end the TIF on Norman Forward projects. I personally want to see these Norman Forward projects stand on their own. And if we have overpromised on some of them, then we need to work within the budget that we have for them, because there are other Norman Forward projects, seniors, that don't have a budget. And we, because of some savings that we've been able to almost luck into, we have that money. And so I don't necessarily feel like projects that have a budget that we might have overpromised on should be able to be interwoven with TIF funds to even further complicate the negotiations to end the TIF. I want it to be as clean of a break as possible, as easy of a negotiation as possible. And I think all we are doing is muddying the waters even further. So when it comes to a site, I'm site neutral. If UTC site is the way council wants to go, I'm fine with that. But I do have some serious concerns about how we are continuing to muddy these waters by trying to add a whole bunch of other components to it that I don't think need to be added.
Councilmember Scott.
Okay.
And then Wilson.
I'll try to make this my last.
She's
set.
had her hand up the entire time.
I know.
I'm gonna make Sarita start going like this.
I know.
a big fat
I have a lot.
Get a flare gun.
So, question about I know that it's been expressed that the timeliness of these projects is really critical to our constituents. And so considering each of these sites, which would be the most expedient?
Can't start till negotiations are done.
If site UMP South would require plating. So that'll take a little bit of time, but that can be done while design is going on.
And it already has the
North Base
sewage
would be
and water.
right, but it already has some of the improvements. North Base would have to be platted, and then we'd have to extend the water and sewer. And then NEDC's property, we'd have to do probably a lot line adjustment. It's already been platted, but relocate some water and sewer lines.
So is it possible that actually the NEDC site might be the quickest for development, or this?
They're probably equal, fairly equal, because of the
Between the three of
relocation
them?
of the water lines. I mean, a lot of that, where it gets relocated to, will depend on the design of the facility too. So
Okay, and then I have a question about the remaining funds. So the 15 to 17 million is what we're expecting by the end of June. And part of that, of course, goes to projects. Some of those projects being road projects like Robinson, which in my opinion is a critical road project, especially if we're going to put attractions up on the northern side of the UMP area. So would it be possible to, I guess the first question about this is how much are we currently allocating out of this toward Robinson? And then would it be possible to allocate more to actually get that project done on the timeline that we were expecting before the whole ACOG?
I think that's what
That's what she's
Councilmember
negotiating.
Castleberry requested, to look and see how much more we
and that's
could
what I've
get
been
out of
working
it.
on in my latest proposal to the developer, to try and see if there's a way to get more money towards that project, so we don't have to rely on federal funds.
That
I don't
would-
know that we can get the full amount, because it would be another $4.5 million.
It would,
When
so
you're-
that would be the
When you're
remaining
fighting
piece
over
that we
15 to
needed.
17, that's quite a bit.
Yeah, but that's, I guess my question, that was part two of my question, was how much would we need to?
I think we were
Allocate.
anticipating $4.5 million from the,
It's 1.3 that we've already obligated.
So
That's it.
1.3.
And the federal match was supposed to be about 4.5 million.
4.5. So we would need to that.
We're trying to
so that's a pretty big chunk. So, and I don't think we can do all of that, but I've been working with, playing with numbers, trying to see what we can make work.
But it's more.
Okay.
Councilmember Wilson.
I am site neutral. And I'm happy with, and I see the value of leveraging our needs and wants with this opportunity to fulfill the development agreements. I will not be in favor of extending the deadline in any way, shape, or form, just FYI for future reference. I kind of want to make just a comment about, we've had some mixed messages about the use of these facilities and how tournament play does not help our local kids, and local kids won't get to use the facility because there's going to be a tournament play and all this stuff. I, like, as a person who had kids in competitive sports where I had to go to Del City, Edmond, and Ardmore and places to have competitive play, that bringing a nice competitive facilities to our community and making it attractive for those families to make a decision to come to Norman and spend their money is actually beneficial to our kids that want to be in sports competitively. I understand that not every kid is that kid, but there are kids in our community that do want to compete on a higher level. They do want to go to collegiate sports. They do want to go to the Olympics or whatever. So getting them quality competition in our community is actually a benefit to our kids. So I just wanted to say that.
maybe Trey Young.
Catherine, can you move ahead
Junior
without us doing a formal vote, or would we need to, can you move ahead? Because what I'm hearing from the majority of council members is that they're comfortable with us kind of settling on for negotiations on the UNP South parcel.
I don't think I need a formal vote to continue with the negotiations focusing on that side. I think the feedback I've gotten is
Okay.
sufficient. If it doesn't work out on that side, I'll reach out to you all and see what you want to do. I've had conversations with OU about the contract at North Base. So, we have, backup plan A and B, really. So,
Mayor-elect Clark.
Do we have Plan C now that Gallagher's leaving and that could all change?
So we've had some pretty important conversations
They're
with
taking part
OU
back.
just generally since Sunday night. And
So you have been on it.
yes,
Okay.
generally speaking, we have a lot of things going on with OU. And so there've been conversations about CART. We had a meeting with the VP of operations today. And it is status quo, no changes anticipated. So I don't think that will impact.
Well, I appreciate you getting on top of that because that was my first thought was shock, but my second thought was, okay, how does this impact everything that we're working on?
Well, and this time we have an MOU that was
All the
voted on
things.
by the regions.
Yeah.
So that's really the difference maker for this.
Huzzah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Bierman.
Just one point of clarification. With neither of these UNP sites, we don't move forward on anything until these negotiations are over and the decisions have been made. It's not like this piece moves forward first.
Right.
So the longer this takes, if it moves into July, or heaven forbid even further, that we still don't move forward on either of those Norman Forward projects
That's true.
until this is resolved. And that includes not moving forward with plating, not moving forward with anything in terms of any sewer improvements or road extension, any of that. Nothing happens until these negotiations are done. So anyone who thinks that if we've decided on a site, that means we move forward, they are wrong.
No, you're right. It's tied up into these negotiations. So these next couple of months are going to be really critical to get those projects moving.
I just wanted to make sure that that's clear
We've already got design
that-
firms shortlisted. So as soon as we
Yeah.
have the land, we can pull the trigger on the design. So we'll be ready when the time comes.
Councilmember Hickman, Councilmember Hickman, Clark, and Castleberry.
Just to follow up on that, I think just so it's important and we're transparent with the public, that I've asked the question sometimes about, what project, which site, I think Councilmember Scott asked about what site could be done the fastest. It seems to me that the truth of the answer to that question is the design for most of these projects, like I've heard about the senior center, is going to be a year long. Any infrastructure work that has to be done, whether it's running water lines, sewer lines, plating, is a year is ample time to get those things done. And those things only have to be done and probably will need to be done as site design work is being done anyway until you start construction. So to me, any comments made by folks about this site could take longer because you got to run water lines or sewer lines or you got to do plating is really not completely accurate in the context of if you have a year-long site design process, that's plenty of time to get everything ready for the site to do construction. Those things will work on parallel. I mean, isn't that a fair statement?
Certainly, we're going to try and get them running parallel and get as many improvements that can be done without having the design complete done. I think, to the extent there are more extensive improvements, that's going to take a little bit more time. That's going to take more time in design, but of course, we'll be doing them simultaneously. Everyone's anxious to get going, regardless of the site.
The frustrating part for me is that my recollection was when we were all excited to get the contract for the North Base. I remember a presentation from our Parks and Rec director that if we move forward on this contract, and this is before the discussions on the North Park came up with the developer, we could have started the design process. I believe it was April. Because we had found out about the contract at the very beginning of this year in December or January, and we could have closed on that land and be right now a month into the design phase. But this issues with North Park came up and the developer, so we tapped the brakes on going forward with that land purchase. But we're telling people that North Park or Reeves Park or other sites are going to be faster when if we had actually done what we had fought to do for over a year to get that land in North Base and had closed on that land, the schedule could have been that we could be in the design phase right now. I understand circumstances change, but I do think it's important that we don't try to rewrite history, that is where we were at as a community, and we're taking a bit of a risk that hopefully these negotiations with the developer work out in a fair way where it doesn't actually end up costing us more money and it doesn't end up delaying things any longer than if we had just pulled the trigger and put all three in North Base at the time we got the land under contract and moved forward. Because I understand also at that time we had site company, or we had design firms in the queue ready to go because we put that out for bid also and could have pulled that trigger. And so that's a little bit of my frustration is I feel like we worked hard to get to that point. I understand things change. We've tied in now the TIF negotiation into these Northern Forward projects. And I just think it's fair that the people know that, you know, we could have been doing that if we had stayed on course with North Base. I understand things change. I'm just hopeful that the way this plays out, it doesn't cost the city any more money and it doesn't delay the projects any more than they already have been. And that's been part of my comments and concerns even about the senior center at Reeves Park is was glad to hear you say, and that's part of what makes one of my concerns is, you know, this is all the negotiation. That's what I do every day as a lawyer. And, you know, when you go to a car lot and you tell the car dealer, you know, I really want that car, I really want that car. And you don't say, well, I like your car, but I like that Honda, but I also really like that Toyota over there. You're weakening your negotiating position. And if we put all our eggs in the one basket, you know, then when you're negotiating with the lawyers like Sean Rieger, I saw Sean come in, who's a fine attorney. But my point is we weaken our bargaining position. If they think all of our chips are in one basket versus, you know, hey, if you guys don't do a fair deal, you know, we're gonna go ahead and pull the trigger on that North Base property. And that's my concern about this conversation is, you know, while I think it's fine to say, and I don't have a big dog in the hunt about the location. I agree with all the comments about the hotels and restaurants. I totally do. But I think it needs to be communicated clearly to them in the negotiation that some of us at least are really are willing and ready to step back to the North Bay side if it ends up being a deal that we don't think is equitable to the community, if at the North Park side. And, you know, in the sense of we're not putting all our eggs in one basket.
We've got a contract on one side.
And that's one, and
We have three
I'm cautious to make
options
sure that we
are
don't
all
let that contract go
viable.
until we have everything else resolved, because I do think it's important to have that in our hip pocket.
I talked to Councilmember Bierman earlier
That was
today
gonna
about
be
this. Yeah. So in the next couple of weeks, if I don't feel like we're making progress, to me in the next couple of weeks, we should be really close to a final decision or final proposal. If we're not, I'll be in contact with OU about extending that deadline a couple of months on that contract to give us time to go back to that option if that's what we need to do. It expires, I think, at the end of June. I'll have to check the date, but that's something we need to keep our eye on.
Councilmember Castleberry.
That was going to be on. I want to make sure that we have this North Bay site in our back pocket from a negotiation standpoint. But one of the reasons why we're even considering that is because there's a possibility from a donation standpoint that land is free or at a reduced price. Let's keep in mind, we had the North Base land for free.
This wasn't documented.
Until the council made a decision to not make it for free.
Only some people knew that, though.
Okay, so if we're going to do this whole revisionist history thing, we wasted a year mainly because of our actions. And we could have been, if North Base was going to be the site, it could have been constructed on now. Okay, I think it's happened. It's water on the bridge, but I don't want to. If we're gonna, let's not keep writing history here. That's just a fact. We had a negotiation, we had an agreement,
Okay.
and so where we are today is what matters.
Okay, I have
And
not,
that cost is going to be about $2.5 million. If it's going to be the same thing, you know, if we don't get a good deal in here, we can say, hey, you guys are in the same ballpark, then we've got a place over here at North Base that we can go to. So, I mean, I think we still have it in our back pocket. I think they know that. I mean, this is our preferred site if it's a good deal. It's not our preferred site, and that we want this site. The price really doesn't matter. This is where we want to be regardless. I think we want to be
The
there
deal has to work.
based on a good deal. Otherwise, we've got another site that's just the same price.
okay, Okay, Councilmember Clark, then Bierman.
Short comment. He skipped me earlier. I didn't skip you. Okay. I have stated I'm prepared to move forward with the Reeves Park because I don't want it entangled in all of this. So is OU still willing to reduce the 2.4 if we take a smaller land, or we wanted to take the full area in case we want to expand on the sites that go there? I just wanted clarification on that.
Yeah, I think either option is available to us.
Councilmember Bierman.
That was part of my point, but I think it's also important to remember that the reason we're in this position is because we didn't have anything in writing. We didn't have a contract. We could say it was free, but it wasn't actually free because we didn't have a contract. And that's why we're playing, land acquisition whack-a-mole with a bunch of Norman Forward projects, because we had nothing in writing before we went to the voters. So that's why I think it's important that we continue to have this in our back pocket, because the whole reason we're in this situation is really because we didn't have anything actually in writing or enforceable that we could hand to OU and say, no, we had an agreement. We had it in
Regents were going to
writing.
vote on it. The Regents were going to vote on it at the next meeting.
Before Norman Forward. We should have had all of this done before
let's-
Norman Forward was even put to a vote.
Okay.
That's why we're in this situation
Okay,
with
now
everything.
Now we're going back over bridges
Yeah,
that were
it's
even
dead.
before
It's
the
dead.
other bridges. So let's look at what we've got. And I think everybody understands that North Base is still up there. We still have the agreement with OU. It's in writing. This is our preference, the UNP South lot. And Catherine will go forward with the negotiations with that as the understanding. Any final questions before we go on to the second item on our agenda? Okay, item number 2 is discussion regarding the FYE 2020 City of Norman Budget Enterprise Fund and other budget-related items. Go get them, Catherine. And Ken is up.
And Kim?
And Kim. Ken and Kim.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, I'd like to,
take it away.
as we start, Kim Kaufman works with Anthony and helped put together our budget. And also on my team, I want to introduce my group is Mark Daniels, and in the back is Chris Mattingly, and we have a new person, Nathan Mandelwall.
Stand up, Nathan. Hey.
We stole Nathan away from Oklahoma City, and so we're very happy to have him.
Good. So they get to the ACOG.
We like that.
Yes, and a new
They get
face,
6 million, we get him.
a new face or a
They make enough
group
money, but we have Nathan.
temporarily is Sumir Sethna. Stand up, Sumir. Sumir's with us for 4 weeks. He's a fellowship person with OU, ICCEW, so he got a State Department grant to come over here. He's from India. He has his own business. He's his own entrepreneurial, his own business in India, and he's here. We're honored to have him shadow us to learn how we work with our customers, our coworkers, our council, and things of that nature. So he's here for 4 weeks.
Have you taken him to the Mont yet to get a swirl?
Good question.
Thank you.
I mean, if you're not doing your job, I mean, that's Norman. So with that.
Lord knows it's patio season.
So as Ken said, I'm Kim Kaufman. I'm the budget manager. And tonight we're going to be discussing the annual budget for the enterprise funds of the fiscal year ending 2020. So this is where we are in the budget process. You've already had the pleasure of the presentations for the general fund and special revenue budgets, as well as the capital funds. The enterprise funds were originally scheduled for April 30th and rescheduled for today. And then we have our second public hearing, another study session, and then when council will consider the budget for adoption on June 11th. So the enterprise funds, the intent of the enterprise funds is that the cost of providing goods or services to the general public is financed or recovered primarily through user charges. The enterprise funds are comprised of the water fund, the sanitation fund, the water reclamation fund and its two sub-funds, the sewer maintenance fund and the new development excise tax fund. We'll begin with the water fund.
Wait, I was gonna back up.
Oh,
Just briefly, as our water fund, our water treatment plant, we're extremely proud of the work they do down there. And they've been over 8 years accident-free or without a recordable accident. And if you look at that picture on the upper right, that's what they've had to work with for the last year and a half. And they'll have another 9 months or so of that. They have to do their rounds every 2 hours. So at midnight or when it's raining or cold or icy, they're still walking around construction site. And so it's really a good testament to their operational skills and just they're looking out for each other to make sure they maintain a safe environment.
The water line maintenance division maintains over 600 miles of water main and almost 6,000 fire hydrants. They repair an average of over 180 water line breaks annually. They replaced over 8,000 feet of old, deteriorated, or undersized water main. They install or replace 20 fire hydrants annually, and they maintain over 40,000 water meters. Water rate history. In 1999, an inverted block rate was adopted to encourage conservation. A water rate increase was approved in March 2006, and another was rejected in August of 2010. Water rates were increased in January of 2015 to fund water treatment plant improvements and an additional 2 million gallons a day supply. The current residential water rate structure currently has a base fee of $6 a month, and then the rate per 1,000 gallons used increases as usage increases. There's a summer surcharge in July and August of 35 cents per 1,000 gallons for usage over 20,000 gallons per month. We're also currently on a mandatory odd even day watering rotation system based on the house number. So this, you can see on this graphic that Norman's water rates for 10,000 gallons of usage are lower than 12 of the 15 cities in this comparison and greater than only 3 of the 15 cities in this comparison. For this rate of usage, Norman's water rates were 20% lower than the average bill of $54.
So going forward with our budget, we just projected a growth in our revenues of 1.9%. It's kind of low compared to some of the previous years. And effective in 2016, we talked about, or we did, new connection fees. They were raised in, I think, 14, 15, and 16. So this is where they currently are as far as meter connection fees. So for a new meter, it's new residential 3/4-inch meter, it's $1,000, but it goes up exponentially. So if you get like a 3 or 4-inch meter, it could be $10,000 and $12,000. So it's expensive. Part of our other budget assumptions going for this year coming up is we're still buying water from Oklahoma City. So we budgeted $1.2 million. That's a take or pay contract. Their water rates go up 5% every year. Our COMCD water purchase through the Central Oklahoma Master Conservancy District, that's out at the lake. We budgeted $1.1 million. That's a small decrease over last year. But coming up in the future is we share all those assets with those other 3 cities. And so the Del City water line will be replaced. It's being designed right now and it'll be replaced in the future. That's probably a $10-11 million project. We're going to pay 43% of that. So that will be something that's coming up. Not next year, but probably for sure the year after. We also budgeted about $700,000 for fleet replacement projects. This is not just for the water treatment plant, but this is also for line maintenance, some of their big heavy equipment that they use. And our ending fund balance looks really good at $8.5 million, but we're still 9 months short of finishing our big project out there. And so we're looking at, we've talked about this for a year or two, needing a water rate increase coming up. If we continue on our projections in fiscal year ending 22, we'll have a negative $2.2 million. So the water fund, like the sanitation fund, is very, very capital intensive. And so you can see that some of the things that we've been planned, we're starting to now push off some of our big projects. But talk about the projects we have done in 2019 is Crossroads Waterline project. That was in a whole development. We did all the water lines, 12-inch, 8-inch, and 6-inch, and new fire hydrants, things like that. Segment D water line from Chautauqua from Lindsay to Timberdale. We did that with OU. They have a parallel water line that we did with that they use for their arsenic water. We had a pilot project for chromium treatment. That was $340,000. Some of these other projects are water lines that we have worked in conjunction with Public Works. So they would have a street project. We will go in, and their obligation is to replace the water line and sewer lines in their street projects. But because we want to upsize the water line, or we'll help them out because they get strapped for funds, we do fund some of the water line projects in the street projects. If I said that right. We fund some of the water lines replacements in the street projects. Example, about $1.4 million for the 24th Avenue water line, Rock Creek water line relocation, about $450,000. And then a replacement for the water line adjacent to the library is just about $80,000. So we do work together pretty well, helping each other with those projects as they come up. We're finishing up our phase 2 water treatment plant. That was a $35 million project. Hopefully, if everything still works good and the weather holds, it should be finished by January of 2020. The wellfield development and permitting project piece of it, that's getting the land and the acquisitions, and the permitting piece is about $1.4 million. And then the next line is the well supplies and the water wells themselves is about $10.5 million. That will hopefully get us 10 test wells to get at least 2 million gallons a day of additional water supply. When that's in place, then we can drop out Oklahoma City's connection. And then a backwash tower that's at the water treatment plant. We separated that out, so it's not done by a contractor. That would be done by us, or we'll contract it for $280,000. Some of the major projects to be completed coming up is you see Robinson Street. That's one of our main water lines that get from our water treatment plant on 36th, essentially in East Robinson, all the way to the Brookhaven Tower on West Robinson. And as some of you know, one of these projects had our water line break on Sunday, Mother's Day, on the
Yes.
south side of the road. These will replace that. That's why that was just a 12-inch. On the north side, there's a bigger line that we're going to be replacing with a 24-inch water line. So when they break, they push out a lot of mud and mess and stuff. So that's part of the reason we're doing this. And then we have segment D water line. Those are some of the north-south water lines that we also are big, large water lines to make sure we have good connection and good transmission. Parsons water line is, again, a whole nother subdivision. Essentially, it's an old subdivision west of campus that we're replacing all of the water lines and increasing the fire hydrant distance, or decreasing the distance between fire hydrants, increasing the fire protection for that subdivision.
Not even very long.
Chris Mattingly is our engineer on that. Specifically, he did a really nice thing that sometimes is unique. Is he had a meeting with all the homeowners to say, hey, here's our water line. It's been in the ground for a long time. You want us to put this in the street? You want us to put this on the sidewalk? Where are you guys going to be happy where we mess up? So it's nice to get some feedback. And then Gray Street water line is around behind us, and the Tanawa is part of that also. So that also broke a number of times that will need to be replaced.
On the Gray Street water line from Flood to Porter, I believe that the transportation bond recently passed will involve those areas going to two-way and some work in upcoming years. And yes. I see this is FY19 to be played in FY20. Is it possible that those water line projects could be coordinated with? I don't know. I don't remember exactly when those transportation deals are going to be done. I'm just wondering. I think what I'm hearing is it sounds like we might be turning up Gray Street for water line in the next 12 months. And then the next 12 months after that, we might be turning it up for a road project. And that usually upsets people.
Yeah. And like,
And I'm just trying to bring that up and see if there's a way of coordinating that.
so hopefully the one-way, two-way will not be tearing up the streets. We're going to tear up the streets to put in a water line. We want to be done and out of there before they start repositioning or restriping. I think the two-way, one-way is not going to be messing with the streets as much as striping. And it's kind of a simplification of
There's
it.
going to be improvements at intersections. We'll do
There's
bump
gonna be
outs,
sidewalks
we'll
and
curb,
stuff.
sidewalks and wheelchair ramps in those areas. Yeah, you're correct.
So we will work with them, but we will hopefully want to be in and out before they do theirs.
And most of these water lines are in the sidewalk area rather than directly in the street.
Well, that was my concern. If they're in the sidewalk area, that's going to be what Public Works is going to be doing. If they're in the street may be partially closed and it may end up having to be partially closed again for some of the Public Works work. But if it's going in, if we're tearing up the sidewalk, then that is some of the same things that the transportation bond, I think, will be doing. Am I remembering that right? And so I mean, to the extent we can coordinate it, I guess that's my ask. Let's try to do that. I just trying to get out in front of, in the next 12 months, a chunk of Gray Street's closed, and then the next 12 months it's closed again, because that is one of the things that people do get upset about. It makes it look like we're not working together as a community when we're tearing up the same thing, twice in a 24-month period of time.
Absolutely. No, that's a very good point. And some of the other projects is flood to Robinson, and Flood Street, Robinson to Venture. Again, that's a long flood street going north to south. James Gardner extension around the library when they build that new road. Building line maintenance. This is a big giant project that will relocate our water line maintenance for water and sewer. That will be changing from North Base over to across from our water treatment plant on Robinson. So we're going to split this money between water and sewer because half of it's for water line maintenance, half will be for sewer line maintenance. And then our hot soils and urban replacements is always done by our water line maintenance crews themselves. And these are usually smaller water line projects that just replace undersized or really deteriorated small sections of water line. Future projects, I won't belabor this because they're future, but you'll see some of these already are starting to be pushed off, delayed from 2020 to 2021. A bigger one, or water tower, $3.5 million, 2023 from 2022. We're trying to keep the water fund alive before we get another rate increase, and so we are very capital. These are big projects, $3.5 million, $1.9 million, and it's a tough way of doing it is to put off projects, but this is what we're trying to do to keep us solvent.
Councilmember Clark.
My apologies, I may have missed it. Where will the new building for line maintenance be?
Across the street from the water treatment plant, that's their new emergency operations.
Water tower.
Okay, so north.
Yeah, and the new emergency operations center, the police, the new dispatching area will be fronting Robinson, will be behind, backed by the water tower.
And it's currently off of Da Vinci, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what will become of the old space?
Fleet is looking at, we share the same building, and they're looking at essentially remodeling and redoing and that whole building to make it more fleet.
Do we have money for that set aside, or that will be a future thing?
Fleet, I think, has budgeted. Reassess that. We're not moving the garbage group because that's all CNG, slow fill, so the sanitation group will stay there.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And again, this is our long-range project that we still are working with DEQ. It's to make sure that we have enough water for our future. Long-term future is we'll get our water like we always do from Lake Thunderbird, pass it through our pipeline that we have to our water treatment plant. The community will use the water. They'll put the water into our water reclamation facility. We'll treat it to a high degree to IPR, indirect potable reuse level of quality. We'll put it into a pipeline that takes it about 3 miles to Dave Blue Creek. Dave Blue Creek will then, the water will flow through the creek about 3 or 4 miles to Lake Thunderbird, and it will start the process again. This is our sustainable, long-term, long-range plan for water supply.
This is IPR.
IPR, indirect potable reuse.
Councilmember Castleberry.
So what's our contingency plan if Midwest City and Del City don't go along with this? And we just not take that pipe directly to the, I know it's expensive, but if with it, I guess what does that cost of saying, listen, we're not gonna put in Dave Creek, we'll just take it right to the treatment plant and treat it ourselves, and you guys don't have to worry about it because we're not putting anything like Thunderbird.
And that's a very realistic thought. On the more positive side, I think, is that tonight at the Midwest Cities Council meeting, which is tonight, they're appointing 3 people to be put on, or we requested 3 people from each community, Midwest City, Del City, and Norman, to be put on a citizens advisory committee to look at the IPR project. So they're appointing their 3 people tonight, hopefully. So in the pilot project that we listed and talked about in our budget, that's about a $3 million project over almost 2 years. We'll hopefully get everybody on board. It'll prove the technology, and we'll have enough conversations with our customers that we're working together. If that doesn't happen, at this point in time, I'm also on the committee with DEQ to make DPR, direct potable reuse regulations. We don't have them yet. So there is no rules to be able to do that. As this process goes and we do our IPR projects, indirect potable reuse, and we prove that this is a viable option, if Midwest City and Del City don't want to do it, it wouldn't be a big step to make the IPR project to treat it to DPR, direct potable reuse. And then the expense would be, instead of piping it just a few miles and have it flow by gravity into the lake, we're going to pipe it through Norman, which is more congested, to get it to our treatment plant.
Well, that's something that I want to keep in the back of our mind. I mean, I really like that as it gives us water independence.
Yeah.
I mean, because we're putting water in Lake Thunderbird that we get 40% of. I mean, what's our allocation?
Right now, our allocation is like 43%, but the new water we put in would be the water that we pay for to clean and put in. So it would raise our allocation up, and then we would get that water.
But we're still going to get 100% allocation of what we put into it.
The way I would interpret it right now, that's stuff we have to work out.
But I'm saying, if they say, no, we're going to stick with our original agreement, that's percentage based on cost.
Right.
And it really doesn't matter we don't know whether water came from your system or whether it rained or came from more or whatever. So the lake water is lake water. We don't care how to get in there and say, no. We put that water in there.
Right.
So, well, we're not going to argue about it because we're not putting any water in there. We're taking it directly to our plant. And you guys, if the lake runs dry in 50 years like it's supposed to, you can figure it out. We'll take care of ourselves.
That's an option. It would be a little more expensive, but that's it. At this
It's not as
point.
expensive as a 50-year plan when the lake runs dry and we have to buy from Oklahoma City.
Oh, yeah, right. So, but this is, we're working with DEQ. We're trying to get DPR regs in place. And so it'll get there. It's slow.
Yes, Councilmember Clark.
Couple of follow-ups on that. Doesn't, if I remember one of your presentations about IPR, which is awesome, by the way, I'm so glad that we are being a trailblazer in this area and long-term plan with water, and I appreciate all your efforts with that. Doesn't it have natural cleaning by going through the creek?
Sure.
I mean, it'll still get where we need it to get by the time it gets to our water treatment plant. Wasn't that a thing?
Yes, I mean, that we could talk for another several hours. We have a great relationship with the University of Oklahoma and their professors. They just did a capstone project.
Yeah, I missed it.
They've done 2 so far just on Dave Blue Creek. One group the season before showed that even with CECs, the constituents of emergency concern, the things that people are more aware of and are concerned about, the things that are not regulated, the hormone disruptors and the pharmaceuticals and stuff, the natural attenuation of a stream does help reduce that. That was the first capstone project. And then just 2 weeks ago, our second capstone project was, so if we put 5 million gallons a day in the creek, what does that do to the creek? Or hydraulically, we're going to hurt the creek. Because that's a thought. But we're getting great work and great cooperation, and students are learning a lot and getting real life experience and something they can put on a resume, not theory, but actual stuff. So it's been working out really good.
Well, I love that you've tapped into that resource that we have as a university town. So
we love them too.
Yeah,
It's
that's
been working out.
definitely mutually beneficial. And then who are the 3 Norman representatives on this committee?
The mayor has asked to pick them.
Okay. And is there anything I can do to help with Midwest City or Del City? do I need to like be, I mean, the mayor has done a great job with that, advocating for us, and I'm happy to continue that if needed. So cookies.
We're in, they have a new mayor in Dell City and he's really nice. And, I think we're in good shape. Just keep it up. Go
If
to
we can
lunch.
get their citizens committee on board, and then we
yeah,
can start
West
working
City has
with
a new
that,
city
through that.
manager.
Great. Just let me know if I can help.
Thank you.
Councilmember Scott.
So to confirm what Councilmember Casper said, 50 years is our shelf life on Thunderbird, and then it's anticipated to run dry.
Well, it's yeah, it's half old, so we paid off the mortgage, so it's 50 years old. In another 50 years, theoretically something would need to be done because its capacity would be decreased by silt. And so, one of the things is working on is the stormwater. If we get a stormwater thing, it will decrease the rate of inflow of silt and sediment in the lake and help prolong the life of the lake. I mean, so there's a whole bunch of what ifs, but 50 years, usually then something should be done with the lake. It doesn't dry up and go away. It loses some of its capacity, its design.
Good question.
I know, yeah. Moving on to the sanitation.
Lucky you. You're like, I'm dead.
I'll be dead.
It probably will be your problem.
I'll be alive in 50
The
years.
curbside recycling.
I plan to be as well.
I need to listen.
Fund.
Can do it. On the council.
Oh, yeah. We'll see how we're feeling. 50
I think we lost your attention.
Yeah, sorry.
Ken's like,
Come back.
Curbside recycling started in 2008. A new 5-year contract began in August of 2018 with Republic Services. Contract rates include a 3% per year increase. We offer single stream curbside recycling every other week. Participation rate continues to be around 90%. Tons collected each month are around 430 tons.
Yes.
Quick question about the recycling. I think I've gotten, we love our recycling in Norman. We're
Yes.
still #1 in the state, I believe, with curbside recycling participation.
Yes.
People have been concerned that our program may be in jeopardy because of China not buying our recycling goods. So do you have any comments on that? Or the 5-year contract locks us in, we're good for these 5 years, or?
And that's one of the things we looked at way back when we started this. We bid against the other contractors to see if we wanted to do this all ourselves. And we were more comfortable with having a contract. So it does obligate them to take our recycling. So it does kind of lock them in for 5 years. And what they do with it sometimes might be questionable. And they have the right to appeal to us saying, we just can't afford to take this material anymore. No one's doing anything with it, or add the material. Recycling is the life of recycling and its thought process has changed dramatically in the last just few years. And it used to be recycle, recycle, recycle. Now it's refuse, reduce, reuse. Recycle is number 4 on the list. So similarly, what you're trying to do with the plastic bags is to reduce packaging. Don't make something you can recycle. Just don't use it. Don't do it. That type of thing. So that's the hard part. But we need to
We were
rethink.
right, colleagues. We were right.
You were, absolutely.
And we're #1.
And we're #1.
But again, I could go on, but that's not the point.
Also given.
You can see in this graphic, the average monthly sanitation rate for the cities compared was $17.36 for sanitation, and Norman is right at average at $17.20 a month. Norman's rate includes spring, fall cleanup days, 1 time a week collection, 1 time a week yard waste collection, free brush drop off, 4 recycling drop off centers, free compost is available. And then the residential curbside recycling.
Love it.
8 of the 15 cities compared.
Councilmember Holman.
I was just going to note, I think maybe it's not the same, but at least a few years ago, I would just note that we also offer a lot. These services, most cities don't offer them, from what I understand. We offer a lot more services.
And if
for
you
less
look at this
than what
list,
others
there's
do.
only 2 that offer curbside recycling that are lower than us. Or were you
8
going to say that?
8 of the 15 cities compared do not include curbside recycling in their rates. Norman's sanitation rate was higher than 9 of the 15 cities compared, but 6 of those 9 did not offer curbside recycling.
Well done.
Councilmember
Carter.
I know we talked about this once, a long time ago, but could you, I know there's this idea about compost and taking that, make it into a profits, or an income stream, Is there any more thought on that or?
We'll get to the point of that just in a minute.
Go ahead.
Sanitation rate increased in April 2011 to $17.20 per unit per month.
Councilmember Castleberry.
Why are we going to grow all the enterprises fund at 1.9, this one at 1.7? Why?
These are just,
I mean, the enterprise funds, it's the same. I didn't understand that.
we just look historically at the level of growth, and the water fund is really a bigger guess than any of them,
Right,
because if you have a
weather
dry
related.
year, the revenues go up. I like dry years.
Yes.
If you have a wet year like this is starting out, you get poop for revenues. And so sanitation is probably the most
Thank you for
stable.
that, Ken.
The poop for revenues on health sanitation fund, right?
So, but
Water reclamation.
sanitation is probably the most
Direct
the most
potable revenue.
non-changing revenue source. I mean, it doesn't reflect, even the wastewater side changes with your winter use water is based on your sewer rates are based on winter use water. Sanitation is just the same every time. So it's just more consistent.
And so it typically grows at 1.7% a year.
Yeah, that's
So
what
you feel better about this number than the other ones?
Yes.
Just that one historical.
Yes.
So don't question.
1720 per month includes $3 per month curbside recycling and 20 cents for Oklahoma solid waste management charge. An additional polycard is $7 a month. Revenues have been estimated growth rate of 1.7% per year.
Oh, okay. This was a mistake. Is the $4.5 million for fleet-related replacement purchases was we overbooked. Usually we spend about $2.5 million for fleet replacements, but we buy big ticket items like the Scarab, which is the thing that turns the compost over, is $650,000. So that's one piece of equipment, and so and the order time on a garbage truck is 11 months, and so this was our combined mess up of did we get this truck or do we order a new truck and stuff like that. So we usually spend about $2.5 million for fleet-related things, and that's been pretty consistent. And that includes replacing polycarts, replacing dumpsters, things of that nature. So we kind of messed up on this one.
So it's supposed to be 2.5, or
yeah,
it is
it's-
4.5?
No, it's supposed to be, the real spending will be about 2.5. The budget reflects a 4.5.
So when we make are you suggesting that we make a budget amendment?
No. Well, we just.
I know you want $2 million cushion here, but
They just won't spend it.
No, but that's the best part about enterprise funds is that we're not obligated to have to spend it or we lose it. Because if we don't spend it, it goes right back into our fund. It's back in our savings account. It doesn't matter. There would be a budget amendment down at the bottom of this. So landfill tipping fees are budgeted about $2 million. And this year we had a new contract with our landfill, and so our rates for this year actually went down 4.6%. So that was unexpected and really, really good because we're one of their best customers. So they do want to treat us, and they do want us to be one of their customers, not move someplace else. But the annual increase from then forward is about 2.8% a year for a 5-year contract. We switched also, one of the reasons we got a better deal is we switched to a 5-year contract, which gives them more revenue stability. It's a guaranteed revenue coming in. People don't usually make less garbage. And so with a bigger, longer contract, we got a better rate. Our ending fund balance is $7.5 million, and we do propose a budget amendment, $1.5 million to pay off a bond that we did when we built the transfer station. So we still owe 6 years on that at 3.45% interest. We have the money, we might as well pay it off. We did not budget that, but we will add that when you do your
What will the
budget.
savings be?
3.5% over 6 years, $200,000.
Great. Super. Councilmember Castleberry.
I understand what you're talking about, but I would like to have staff prepare a budget amendment to That doesn't reflect what it actually is.
We can do
As
that.
we start looking at 4 and 5 year trends down the road, and we could start looking back at numbers, I think we want to have as accurate budgets if we go through there or not. Oh, don't you guys remember back in 2007, we actually left $2 million cushion in there just because we don't have that leverage. And so I also think that also helps with your bottom adjustment with what it keeps that fund about the same
Yeah.
there. So I think they might offset each other. I just think it's more reflective of what we're actually doing. We recognize this type of
We
thing.
can,
So
we can do that.
we can just
Absolutely.
kind of, I don't know what the exact number is going to be. That's why I want, if you guys tell me what that number would be,
Yeah, yeah.
I'd appreciate that.
Yes. So you do have some big projects. The sanitation fund usually doesn't spend a lot of money on projects. Usually they buy trucks. We have a East Side Recycling Center that we had finished this past year. That's $160,000. One of the things that we're doing is reusing our water reclamation effluent on our compost. That's $480,000. We finally got EPA, DEQ approval on that. So we'll actually start that project soon. And then you asked about the compost. We did work again with, it was the ICCEW group from OU on our compost and to develop ways of making money. So compost is made from nitrogen and carbon. So you have the green waste and the brown waste, which is, they love it in the summertime. We have lots of green sloppy grass clippings. That's really, really good for nitrogen. In the wintertime, we have an abundance of brown. And so several times a year, we end up with just big stockpiles of brown waste. And so in the past, we would give that away for free. And through that ICCEW student who kind of did some analysis and called around and did other thing else, we now sell it. So it's not a bunch of money, but we're selling it, which is more fun than giving it away for free. And then the next piece of the puzzle is this Class A compost. It's a big project, is because compost takes nitrogen and carbon, and it takes about 100 days, 120 days to blend those two and to have them decompose. If we use the biosolids from a water reclamation facility right across the street, it takes about 60 days. So it's half the time. And then you end up with a Class A product, which means right now our biosolids, we have to land apply, and it's Class B, which means you have to put it on the field. You have to do all sorts of testing on the field to make sure the field uses up all the fertilizer we're putting on it. And you have to test for metals to make sure we're not overloading the field. And then even when you grow your hay, you first cut it after 6 inches, you cut it, leave it, you have to grow it again before you can use it. If we use that with our yard waste, it's a Class A product. So you can touch it, handle it, feel it, put it in your yard, do anything you want with it. And so one of our engineers, Nathan, our new engineer, is looking at what other cities, not that many cities do this. So what other cities do it? How hard is it to do? What are the DEQ regulations that are different than what we're doing now? So that's a big project, but that might be some more fun.
So Ken, will that mean that when we first started talking about this with Susan Bergen last year or the year before, one of the issues about making more compost and making the higher level was I thought we needed more land. So if we do this, does that mean we don't need more land?
Well,
To spread it
we
out?
could always use more land, but right now our process takes about 100 to 120 days to
Right,
decompose.
and you're saying 60.
Right, which means you'd be able to turn it over a lot faster. So it would not need as much land.
Okay, that's great. Councilmember Carter.
So in just a grand scheme of things, that's awesome. And that, giving free compost to Norman residents, that whole thing. But if you look at, we need revenue streams for a few things, like a forester and let's say planting more trees. And I've talked to OEC and OEG about, starting some kind of a program where maybe the city, a homeowner, and the utility company would share in burying some utility lines, for example. But we need the city side of that needs revenue stream, To me, maybe the compost, it's not a lot of money, but, especially with all the things, you just got me more excited about working on that. So I'll be interested in working with you over the next year. It's not something I'm sure that we can do for this budget, but, if we can squeeze out enough money that we could fund the forester, or we squeeze out enough money, we could plant some trees down Berry Road, or we could, aid some homeowners in burying some lines that want to bury their lines down in Core Norman. Hey, it'd be awesome. So.
I'd be happy to work with anybody because the hard part that these cities are finding is you make a really, really good product and people from your hometown are more squeamish about using it than if you put it in a bag and put it in the store and somebody else bought it.
Yeah.
Because they say, where'd that come from? What came from our sewage treatment plant?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
You know, so it's kind of, it's a great product.
There's a marketing thing in
That's
there.
the hard part.
We're gonna work on that.
That's the hard part.
Councilmember Clark.
Do we foresee,
Sorry.
sorry, I guess I could have waited till the end. Do we foresee any rate increases in the near future for sanitation?
No. We're doing good. We're doing well. What is it?
Well,
So right now, just water.
Right now, water. Yeah, we're starting to, like I said, we're starting to put things off.
Okay.
And the same thing with our household hazardous waste facility. We're actually, it was listed as a budget as a material recovery facility, a MRF, but with recycling the way it is, that's not that advantageous. And we're finding we're having a harder and harder time with our household hazardous waste project that we do once a year to find a qualified contractor that does well. And our citizens call on a monthly basis saying, hey, where do I take my paint? Hey, I'm moving out of town. Where do I take my crap? You know, something. And so we're kind of looking at doing that building rather than the material recovery facility. And then the container maintenance facility would be one where we repair our own dumpsters and make sure they're painted and they look nice. So it's a better projection of the city. You have all these dumpsters around, they ought to look nice. And a truck washing facility is, again, originally we thought we would try to do that, set it up using our effluent from our water reclamation facility.
yeah.
But that's run into a lot of slowing parts with DEQ. So we thought we would just build the truck washing facility using potable water and then still work with DEQ to have it located close enough to our water reclamation facility that we would just eventually get to use recycled water. But they're slow on, they are a very conservative group.
Councilmember Clark.
So will the household hazardous waste facility replace the event? Or would you move the event in the area, or
If
still
we-
have the event and ship it over there?
If
Great
we-
to have it year round.
This is a year or two out that we'd actually get this facility up and running and stuff, but then we would not do the event because that you could call anytime and say, hey, what am I going to do with my paint? And right now at our transfer station, you know, we take tires, oil, antifreeze, white goods, and glass. So this would just be the hazardous stuff that we would add, and then we would not have that event. That event costs about $120,000 for a one-day event. And it gets, you know, great support, but it'd be nice to have this, you know, we open this up 1 week a month or something like that, have it available.
I think that's a fabulous idea. I love that. Councilmember Bierman.
So I started with one question, now I have two. First one is, what are white goods?
Oh, sorry. White goods are metal things like your washing machine, your dishwasher, your refrigerator, things like that. And we even, and even better, because some of the white goods were limited, like your refrigerator, freezer and stuff had to be de-freoned, you know, where now, because we have a central place and we take it, we have a guy coming out and he'll do that for us. So you can just bring out your refrigerator without having to de-freon it first. And then we'll take care of it and fix it for you.
Well, I will say,
Not
I don't
fix
think
it.
enough people know about
Throw it
that.
away.
But my second question is, I know I've had a couple conversations with you about styrofoam recycling.
Yes.
There's a facility in Ada that does it, and there is a company, Dark Containers, down in Dallas that not just recycles but reuses. They take the styrofoam, they figured out ways to like get all the air out of it, the thing that makes it all light and fluffy, and then they make lightweight airplane parts and, you know, components for picture frames and things that need to be sturdy but lightweight. And trucks go right down I-35 through Norman to Dallas to Dark Corporation. So might there be some way, I mean, granted, styrofoam isn't technically hazardous in its inert form, but it has chemicals in it that are incredibly damaging to the environment. And right now we have no way to handle those goods. But we have some interested groups in town that are hoping that we can figure out some sort of way to partner with DART or figure out some way to get our styrofoam goods, because I don't think there's a bigger styrofoam user in Norman than Norman Public Schools, to have some way, and I don't know if it's through the hazardous waste facility or through something. I would love to see us find a way through the sanitation fund to be able to address this issue, because especially if Norman Public Schools are going to be continuing to use styrofoam at the rate that they're using with their trays, their food trays. That's what they serve lunch on. I assume there was some cost benefit analysis of not having the trays and the dishwashers and all of that kind of stuff. But the impact on the environment, though, is pretty significant. So if there's any way, whether it's through the design of the hazardous waste facility or through, you know, one of our other facilities to make that work. I know we talked about some possible options previously, but I did not know about the hazardous waste facility. So maybe that, and like fingers crossed that if we can just keep that a part of the conversation.
Absolutely. Everything should be a part of the conversation. You're right. That's not a problem. Keep it part of the conversation. It's logistically, that's a tough one.
And that's the thing. Styrofoam cannot go in the recycle bin, as Councilmember Hickman just asked. So
absolutely.
Yeah, since we don't have another option other than just throwing it in the trash and having it go in the landfill, there's any way that we can kind of keep that in mind as we're developing, you know, a hazardous waste facility or something like that. I'd really love for us to continue thinking about that, because if Ada can figure out a way to do it, Norman can.
And just, go ahead, sorry.
I said I love it.
Oh, I do too. But another plug for a recycling piece is you have to keep it clean. I mean, a used Sonic cup is not good. Even though you think, oh, it's styrofoam, I should recycle it. It really has to be washed out. You can't have soda residuals and stuff like that. So that's the biggest problem with any recycling. It has nothing to do with specifically with styrofoam, but just cardboards, plastics, things. Is you got to keep it clean. It's another piece of the puzzle.
Me too.
Okay, guys, we have 15 minutes.
And we're almost done.
Is that why you don't want pizza in my pizza box? I throw it away?
Yeah. What? Oh, so our water reclamation facility, we're very proud of that facility. You guys and our citizens just spent $63 million upgrading the facility, and it has great results right now. These are the things we're testing for, is our carbonaceous biological oxygen demand, CBOD. We have a 98% removal on average. Our TSS, which is total suspended solids, how cloudy is your water? We're about 98% removal. Ammonia is tougher. Because the bugs are more susceptible to temperature change. So when it goes from winter to summer, they get upset, and from summer back to winter, they get upset. But generally, we're about 99% removal of ammonia, which is a lot of nitrogen. That makes the fish unhappy downstream. So it's good to remove that. And then the fecal coliform, that's...
I was just going to give a shout out to David on there. We went to middle and high school together, and he's from Norman and grew up here, and now he's responsible for looking over that part of the facility down there. Yeah, he's very neat. So.
And again, our operators, a shout out to the operators. They went through all of that construction without a injury. They're now like 2 years without an injury, but before that, there were 5 years without a recorded time injury. And that's a lot of those guys looking out for each other.
The sewer line maintenance division maintains over 500 miles of sewer lines, almost 12,000 manholes, cleans over 1.5 million feet of sewer lines each year, inspects and records over 200,000 feet of sewer lines, and over the last 20 years reduced sanitary sewer overflows by 90%. And the water reclamation rate, the average water reclamation rate for 10,000 gallons of usage in this comparison was $52.46 per month. At $37 a month, Norman is well below this average. As you can see in the comparison, only Lawton has a lower rate than Norman.
So the last time we raised our wastewater rates was in 2013. Again, our revenue budget is 1.9%. That's just a good guess. And our ending balance is projected at $6.5 million, which is a nice ending balance. Some of the projects that we're still working with DEQ to get finalization, is our reuse pilot project. That'd be $1.6 million this year, and then another $1.5 million for next year. The Class A sludge improvements, we're sharing with sanitation because it's going to help the biosolids and our compost. So we share that project. Also, the line maintenance building that we talked about by the new tower, we're sharing the sewer line maintenance with water line maintenance. So water and sewer both are sharing in the cost of that. A septage receiving station is one that we're looking at. Septage is when you clean out your septic tank. And the only place you can discharge that now is up in Oklahoma City. So we have a lot of rural Norman and a lot of rural areas around Norman
We have rural Norman.
that could use a septage receiving station.
Porta
It's-
potties and porta potties.
And porta potties.
I don't know.
So
that's a
these
service
are
from the city.
are a little bit
They want it.
difficult
Now my
to
septic tank.
make and install and monitor because you don't want people putting
I know.
hazardous stuff and ruining your treatment plant. But it could also be
I just want to
very
see how
useful.
long you guys are going to keep that up.
He's about to
Councilmember
get it.
Wilson.
And roller derby girl elbow to the nose. Septic receiving station, does that cost the folks bringing it in? Is there a charge?
Yes, absolutely,
Okay.
because the septic tank haulers
Right, because
don't have many places to put it, and we're closer than Oklahoma
So
City.
is it like by the pound or by the
How often
visit?
do they
I mean,
do
I don't know
that
if I
to
want to
you?
ask this question.
Yeah, it's
I'm
usually-
curious.
It's per 1,000 gallons type stuff,
Okay.
per 1,000 gallons.
And what's the fee on that?
We don't know. We're still in the process of seeing if we want to do this and what the regulations entail. And some of it is either you're going to have to, it's going to be expensive because you have somebody that monitors it, or you're going to have to trust who's doing it. And because they could really harm our whole water reclamation facility if they put the wrong stuff down there.
Oh, well, that is a good question. Bill Hickman just
I
said, what do we do with it? It just goes into the regular.
Yeah, it just gets
sludge,
blended with, because it's just concentrated.
It
Biosolids.
gets cleaned up.
Yes, it gets clean. That's correct.
My favorite topic, I'm sorry.
The bugs that we're excited
We're
about.
biosolids specialists, so, you know.
And so some of the future projects coming up is a effluent reuse project. That would be just putting a water line up towards the ball fields at Reeves Park eventually with reuse water to water them. We can work with DEQ better.
I like that.
Like
I do
that.
too. And then eventually, that big piece of reusing our water reclamation effluent is a big project. So that's 50, 60, 70, 80 million dollars worth of work there.
That'll be a bond issue.
Yeah, would that be a bond?
Oh, yeah, but it'd be a revenue bond, which means paid by our customers.
Councilmember Holman.
Are you sure? it's
OU's
long-term?
already watering the golf course with effluent from our treatment plant, aren't they?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
something like close to that.
Well, that's interesting you brought that up. But we're just having conversations with them because the DEQ has new regulations that just want to make sure they monitor it better and tighter. And so OU is looking at maybe not using our effluent if they want to put up with more regulations or not.
Because of the hassle?
Yeah,
Or-
the hassle and cost. I mean,
Cost.
everybody's cost effective. And so if it costs more because you have to take tests that you never took before, you might choose not to do it.
They can use
So that's we're talking with them about that now.
their arsenic wells is what they use for everything else.
Mhm.
Water it with arsenic, water it with effluent, whatever.
This is mine? Or yours? So our sewer maintenance fund, similar to the water side, the revenues for water treatment plant also support the water, the water maintenance fund, and the sewer revenues from the water reclamation facility also support the sewer maintenance. Oh, this is different. Sorry. This is a different funding. This is our $5 maintenance fee. This is the thing that was passed in 2001. And this is wonderful because it keeps us with about $2.6 million a year to replace old, dilapidated, and broken sewer lines. And that's one of the things that Kim talked about earlier was in the last 20 years, we reduced our overflow rates, which are things you get in trouble for, by 90%. That's phenomenal. We're like a poster child, the city is, for how to do this right because of this fund. This has been a really, really, really good fund.
So proactively.
Would have been good if we had a $5 stormwater.
It was overflowing in the streets, if I remember. But
Yep,
it took
they were.
it took it overflowing.
And our
in the
utility
streets.
rates would still be lower than almost everybody else.
But it took
then-
waste flowing through the streets for people to support that, though.
So we do have a sewer development excise tax that's on new development only. And again, the projected 2020 is a little bit on the high side. Well, it was just based historically going a straight line through, and it should probably be projected lower. The total number is about 1.7 million. It's 1.3 from residential and 0.4 from commercial. It's really just tied, it's 100% tied to how much development we get.
That's what I was kind of curious. Why do you think we're getting some more development? This is the only fund that we're projecting more development.
Yeah, this one we didn't catch so much. We just kind of looked at it. It historically was about 1.7, 1.6, and we didn't adjust it down.
Historically, go back to 2015. It's
Well, if you look at what it was
Going
budgeted for historically, it's just the budget line went straight.
I'd be looking more at what it actually does. As
Yeah.
what the budget did.
Yeah, no, you're correct. We could do that too. We can make an amendment on this and adjust it down. That'd be okay with me.
Councilmember Hickman.
Is this excise tax, is it tied to the square footage size of the?
Yes.
So this is the one that if you go over X square, 812, what?
It's $850 for the first 1,200 square feet and then $2 a square foot over that.
And when was this put in place?
2001. Same
At the
time.
risk of sounding crazy, is this something that in current days, should we raise the size of that square footage? Because our average home's bigger now than they used to be. Because it seems like that's a relatively high excise tax based on that size of square footage. I mean, I'm just curious, do we know, do other cities have excise taxes like that tied to that relatively small size of square footage?
Yeah, whether you call it an excise tax or an impact fee, you're right. You build a big house and you get hit with a pretty good number, but it also supports a lot of what the Water Reclamation Fund and Sewer Fund has been doing. So if you look at the projects, completed partial funding of the Water Reclamation Facility, that was a $36 million project. These excise taxes paid for 25 million of it. So they paid the growth portion of that. So we had to upgrade the facility, but we also added from 12 million gallons a day to 17. That 5 million extra was paid for by these excise tax. So it's an advantage to have to be able to grow your utility for new customers, but it's expensive.
It looks like your fund balance is staying fairly consistent. It's not like we're drawing down on it. Your fund balance looks like it's fairly consistent going out, so it's not like we're drawing down on it.
Right.
It's not like the excise tax is not enough to cover that. It's not a shrinking balance. It looks
Well,
like
and we have to be careful how we use it. We have to use it only on growth items. We can't use it to repair something. This one, if I say that, then this Bishop Interceptor down here is a problem because it's at its capacity. So we're going to replace it, but we're going to make it bigger. So the sewer maintenance fee will replace it for $2.6 million because it's old and it needs to be replaced. The excise tax will pay for almost $1 million, at 940, almost $1 million to make it bigger. So you can't use it to replace the whole thing. We can only use the excise tax for growth, the part that isn't funded by our current customers. Mark does an excellent job on that, on all these projects. Mark is the one that really figures
I
out.
like to make it complicated and normally it's all right.
Is when we replace something, if we replace it strictly to replace it, it has to be a maintenance thing. If we're replacing it, making it bigger, how much of that incremental cost to make it bigger comes from the excise tax?
Councilmember Scott.
What would have to be done to make the excise tax be usable on maintenance rather than just on growth?
That would be like
it's voted on because excise tax is voted on.
Yeah, it was voted on, so it just to be a vote. But
Is it a tax? I'm not asking about a tax increase.
It's
I'm
not tax.
saying
It's a change in tax.
a change.
yeah, it would be a vote.
Woohoo. Okay.
3 minutes.
Councilmember Wilson.
So if we adjusted the excise tax, could we then adjust other impact fees to be more appropriately placed in their proper funds. So I guess the point I'm making is that we are constantly being told that we have the highest impact fees. And I'm just thinking that if the excise tax were more appropriately
Yeah, I mean,
figured, could we then find a way to, I know all that would take a vote of the people, but
and it's a
one or
balancing
two to
act.
have those funds in the proper places, because
Mhm.
that's not what I've thought all along. If we have the highest fees, we have the lowest at this and the lowest of that, but the highest impact fee, like, isn't not just a whole, I don't know what I'm trying to say
No, I
exactly, but a
agree.
whole review of
Right,
that
you're
to
right.
kind of come
Yeah.
up with the proper fees and the proper funds.
And any utility is a balancing act between funding for growth, because more customers are better than less customers. Any business, more customers are good. So do you want to subsidize new customers, or do you want them to pay 100% of everything is new? And so it's always a balancing act. It's always what is beneficial to the community. What will the community prefer? It really is there's no absolutely perfect answer.
Well, my personal opinion is that as we look at development and smart development as we move forward as a city and a community, I would like to see the burden put on growth.
We just kind of said opposite of what you just.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying adjusting them both
She's a
all the way around.
politician.
I'm just talking around in corners.
Councilmember Hickman.
Okay, so the follow-up to my excise tax question, and I think I understand that, and it sounds probably good because it is really tied to new development. On the water fund, we hear a discussion about connection fees or whatever, and do we have a similar, or should we have a similar approach to be able to better quantify the costs of new development on our water fund? And could that be a increase of connection fees and or some kind of an excise tax like we have for our wastewater?
And the answer is yes. I mean, we could, Raftellus did this study that said what your connection fees could legally be. And then since then, we've changed or updated or continued with our capital program. So it's not easy, but it's a matter of, if you look at your capital program, how much of it is for new development because you're adding new customers, and how much is it for replacement and changing regulations and stuff. And so you come up with that balance or that formula, and then you say, well, then development should pay what % of funding themselves.
And I guess, really, because we've had some initial discussions about this topic in the Community Planning and Transportation Committee, and Terry, I know, has done some work on the discussions we've had about a HERS version, if you will, of water, to promote water conservation and things like that. And I guess, I think that's a broader, kind of a holistic solution, of if new development, are they paying their way? Should we look at raising fees, but do that in conjunction with, if it's smart growth, that's, low impact, water type projects or things like that, or if there's things that could be done on the reclamation side of things, kind of thinking a little bit outside the box and thinking, futuristic of how we could tie our fees to incentivizing the kind of smart development that we want. And that might mean, putting some fees in place or raising fees that we have right now, but also with an opportunity for our developers to pay less if they put in place the kinds of green development that I think, we've talked about and some of us would like to see, so to where they kind of control, if in a sense, the ability to have lower fees by doing some of the things that maybe some of them are already doing right now, but, or with minor changes in their form of development could take advantage of some of these rebates or ever how we want it to structure. I just wanted to bring that up because it's something I know we've had some initial conversations in the CPTC about, and I think it's something that we should continue to talk about, and I can see how they could be a paired solution.
Councilmember Castleberry.
One question that comes. We currently sell 1,000 gallons of water. Are they profitable?
Again, it's the water fund is not sustainable with the capital projects.
My capital project's just operating.
Well, if you don't do any capital projects, your infrastructure will go to. So you
Part
can't
two of
do
my
one
question,
without the
first
other.
question is, does it cost us $2 a gallon and we sell them for $3?
Yes.
So from an
Like that.
operating standpoint, we're selling water for more than it costs us.
Yes.
So that in mind, I think you have to look at how you price this as there's two components. There's the upfront cost, which is a connection fee, and then there's that profit you get from that new development going forward. That's what you're talking about as far as your new customer.
Yes.
This is the cover charge versus how much do I charge for a beer.
Right.
Why my beer is free and it's $100 to get in. Nobody comes in. $50 for cover charge, then it's $1 beer. And so I think we have to figure what that mix is. And I think that's kind of, we compare ourselves to other cities. They're doing higher utility rates.
Right.
And lower connection fees.
That was a good analogy.
You know, and so I think you have to, and I don't know if, there's an optimal mix in there.
The beer part.
That's a great analogy.
It was.
But there's an optimal deal in there.
Set them up.
That was great.
But you can't just say
Rather
that,
pay for
okay, so we're putting this line in because of new development, therefore,
Yeah.
that new development has to pay 100% of that cost upon
Right.
connection.
Right.
Knowing that they're going to be a customer for a long period of time and you're amortizing that cost over the life of that customer, just like if you were to buy a business and one of the things you buy is a customer list. Well, I don't say, okay, I want a 100% return on my money the first year of number of customers. I plan on having these customers for 5, 10, 15 years, and I'm going to recoup my investment over that period of time. So I think it's a hard calculation.
That was
Obviously, but I think you have
excellent.
to take that in mind of how are we looking at how we recover our costs. Do we do it all at one time, or do we cover it a little bit at one time, a lot at one time, or, it's part of the fee rate structure that goes in there.
Well, what we can tell from the chart that's up there, and we've all talked about it before, we do a really good job on our utility rates, keeping them as low as possible. And we look very good in comparison to most of the other cities around us. And we'll continue trying to do that, but we are going to be looking at a water rate increase. So anyway, any other questions? I think we're after 6. So
Hold on. You wanted to say one more thing.
Okay, one more thing.
Discuss this last slide. The average utility bill in this comparison was $127.59. That includes 10,000 gallons of water, sewer, and then the minimum trash and stormwater for the 13 of the 16 cities that do have a stormwater utility. At $97.50, Norman's average bill is about 24% below the average monthly bill. In this comparison, Ardmore and Lawton were the only cities with lower utility bills than Norman, and Lawton does not offer curbside recycling.
Thank you all very much. Informative presentation.
Good job.
Thank you.
I did one.